Hello and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Nick. Today, we're digging into something a lot of learners feel, but don't always talk about. That strange sensation of being a different version of yourself when you speak English.
You might have noticed it yourself, how you sound different, or act slightly different, when you're using English. Maybe you're more confident. Or more quiet. Or maybe you feel like your personality shifts a little.
And that leads to a really interesting question: is that version of you real? Or is it a kind of mask? A performance? Or maybe it's actually a newer, unfolding part of who you are?
Because the moment you switch into another language, you're not just translating words, you're moving into a different rhythm, a different emotional tone, even a different way of thinking. And that shift can feel like both a discovery and a mystery.
So today we want to explore that space. That gap, or connection, between your native language self and your English self. And ask, not just who you are in English, but what that version of you means.
Because sometimes people worry, am I being fake when I speak English? Or, is this really me, or am I performing? And I think that question comes from a deep place of wanting to feel authentic.
Yeah. And it's fair. When you're speaking in a language that isn't your first, it's easy to feel like you're putting on a costume. Like the version of you who says, "How are you doing today?" isn't quite the same person who says it in your native language.
But maybe we've got it backwards. Maybe that version of you in English isn't fake. Maybe it's just new. It hasn't had as much time to grow. It hasn't had all the years and experiences that your first language self has.
That's a really helpful way to look at it. Not fake, just unfamiliar. Still learning. Still shaping itself. And I think the more you speak, the more that version of you starts to feel natural. Lived in. Real.
And in some ways, you get to choose who you are in English. You can bring forward parts of yourself that maybe don't get much space in your native language, like being more direct, or playful, or calm.
It's like you're building another voice. Not to replace the first one, but to add to it. You're not deleting who you are. You're expanding.
And that expansion can feel a little awkward at first. Because you're not used to hearing yourself in this new voice. But the more you speak, the more you realize, this version of me feels honest too.
Exactly. And that honesty might sound different in English, but it's still yours. Even if the words are simpler, even if the tone is quieter, the intention is real. The feelings behind the language, they're you.
And maybe that's the point. Fluency doesn't just mean sounding like a native speaker. It means being able to be yourself in English. And sometimes, that self surprises you.
Right. You might find yourself saying things in English that you wouldn't normally say in your native language. Not because you're pretending, but because English gives you a different kind of freedom.
A different way of expressing emotions, or making decisions, or even setting boundaries. It can feel like stepping outside of the rules you've grown up with and asking, who am I allowed to be here?
And that's really powerful. Because sometimes, when we grow up in one language, our identity gets shaped by the expectations within it, culturally, emotionally, socially. But when you speak another language, you get to loosen some of that. You get to redefine.
Exactly. You get to explore. You might be more assertive in English. Or more expressive. Or more vulnerable. That doesn't make you inauthentic. It just means you're discovering more of what's possible for you.
So maybe the English version of you is the real you, or at least, a real part of you. One that's just beginning to take shape. One that isn't finished yet, but is no less honest.
And even if it feels different, that difference can be beautiful. It's not about which version is better or more you. It's about holding space for all the ways you exist, in every language, in every voice.
And what's interesting is, as your English improves, the gap between those versions starts to close. The more confident you feel, the more your English self and your native language self begin to blend. You stop thinking in two pieces and just feel whole.
Yes. And I think that's when people really start to enjoy the process. When speaking English isn't about pretending anymore. It's about revealing. About letting something emerge from inside you that maybe you hadn't noticed before.
It's not about trading one identity for another. It's about layering, adding, evolving. Sometimes the English version of you helps you access emotions that were buried. Or lets you say things more clearly than you ever have.
And there's something very human about that. We're not fixed. We're always shifting, depending on where we are, who we're with, what language we're using. And that doesn't make us any less real.
No, it makes us richer. More dynamic. You can still be you in English, even if that version of you is a little more hesitant, or a little more expressive. It's still coming from the same heart.
And honestly, sometimes English gives people the permission to start again. To find a calmer voice. Or a louder one. Or a more curious one. And that's not a loss of identity, it's growth.
So when you ask, is the English version of me real? The answer might be yes. It might be the part of you that's still becoming. Still stretching. Still learning how to be seen in a new way.
And maybe the reason it feels a bit strange is because it's still new. Just like any part of your identity that's growing, it takes time to feel comfortable in it, to trust it. To feel like, yes, this is me too.
That trust builds through use. Through showing up in conversations, even when you're unsure. Through expressing your real thoughts, even if it takes a bit longer to find the words.
And each time you do, you're reinforcing something important, that this voice matters. That this version of you is worth listening to, even if it sounds different from your native voice.
It's not about copying someone else's way of speaking or trying to sound like you grew up somewhere you didn't. It's about finding your English voice, the one that feels honest and alive in your mouth.
And that voice might come with an accent. With pauses. With imperfections. But it also comes with intention, personality, emotion, and that's what makes it real.
So if you've been feeling unsure about which version of you is more true, maybe the answer isn't to choose. Maybe it's to accept that you can be many things, and they can all be real.
Exactly. You can be quiet in your first language and confident in English. Or soft in English and fiery in your native tongue. You don't have to explain it. You just have to live it.
Because languages don't just translate words, they reveal sides of you. And English might just be the language that brings forward a version of you that was waiting for a place to speak.
And sometimes, that version of you doesn't have all the vocabulary yet. Sometimes it makes mistakes, or freezes in the middle of a thought. But even in those moments, especially in those moments, it's real.
There's something very honest about speaking when you're still learning. You're not hiding behind perfect grammar or big words. You're just showing up. Trying. Communicating. Being human.
And I think people feel that. The people you talk to, even if they're native speakers, they can feel the effort, the sincerity, the truth behind your words. Even if your English is simple, your meaning isn't.
No, it's not. The meaning is full of life. Full of the thoughts, dreams, and feelings that belong to you. And those things, they are not less powerful in English. They are just shaped a little differently.
So maybe we can let go of this idea that there's only one true version of ourselves. Because the truth is, we're always changing. Growing. Learning how to express new parts of who we are.
And English, for so many people, becomes a space where that growth happens. Where they give themselves permission to evolve. Where they find the courage to speak, not just the language, but their truth.
That's why I always say, don't wait until you feel fluent to be yourself in English. Be yourself now. Let this version of you speak, even if it's quiet. Even if it's unsure. It matters.
Because the goal isn't to become someone else. It's to feel safe enough in English to show who you already are, in a new light, in a new rhythm, in a voice you're still getting to know.
And maybe part of the beauty is exactly that, getting to know yourself again. Discovering how you express joy in English. How you explain pain. How you tell stories. How you connect.
And sometimes, that discovery happens in the smallest moments, when you say something without translating first, or when someone laughs at your joke, or when you hear yourself and think, that sounded like me.
Yes. Like you, in English. Not perfect. Not scripted. Just present. Just real. That moment is worth everything, all the studying, all the pauses, all the mistakes.
Because that's when you realize, you're not chasing someone else's voice. You're creating your own. One that sounds like you, feels like you, and carries your story in every syllable.
And even if that voice is still growing, still unfolding, it deserves space. It deserves patience. And it deserves to be heard, not just by others, but by you.
Because the English version of you isn't a replacement. It's a reflection. A version of you shaped by experience, effort, and the choice to begin again in a new language.
And that choice, to grow, to speak, to become, is one of the most human things you can do. So if you've ever wondered whether that voice you use in English is real, trust it. It's you.
It's the you who's learning to express, to connect, to live more fully across languages. And that's something worth celebrating, not questioning.
Thanks for joining us today on the British Accent Podcast. We hope this conversation reminded you that your English voice is just as valid, just as worthy, and just as real as any other part of you.
Wherever you are in your English journey, we're proud of you for showing up, in your own voice, in your own way.
We'll be back soon. Until then, keep speaking, keep growing, and keep trusting the version of you that's still unfolding.
Take care.